This is E.T., and this here is James Corbett, former heavyweight champion of the world, born 1866 in San Francisco. Andrew Johnson was U.S. President. Corbett died in 1933 in Bayside, New York. That was weeks before Franklin Roosevelt took office. Corbett won the title by beating the great John L Sullivan. That was in 1892, New Orleans. Sullivan, by the way, entered pro boxing during the bare knuckle days. He became the first recognized heavyweight champion under the Queensberry rules. Corbett lost the title in 1897 to Bob Fitzsimmons. Corbett was the first heavyweight champion of the gloved era to rely primarily on science. In other words, he is the ancestor to the smooth and dexterous fighters who used thinking, not simply brute force, to win a fight. That means head movement, blocking with the arms and shoulders, learning how to clinch, the graceful, shifty footwork, how to feint an opponent. And although he was not known as a knockout puncher, he could hit when he wanted to. Corbett was also a bit ahead, at least of most of his day, with his training methods, which he exhibited at the Olympic Club in New Orleans. He knew at the age of 26, Sullivan, who was a month from being 34, had not fought in years. He was not in fighting shape, despite what the newspapers hyped about the bout, proclaiming the Boston Strong Boy to be fit. The fact is, the many disparate reports of Sullivan's weight did point out that he was heavier than usual. The New York Times and the Sun reported that Sullivan weighed 212 pounds. That's quite a bit heavier than his normal weight. And one Australian newspaper said Sullivan weighed 216. Corbett, on the other hand, much lighter, fat-free, at about 187 to 190 pounds. The reports in the newspapers varied. Given that this was a fight to the finish, Corbett's own dexterity and fitness would give him an advantage over Sullivan's power and aggressiveness. I'll address the actual bout in a later upload, but this video relates to how the combatants trained. Corbett, weeks before the fight, would be working out with Joe Choinski, previously a bitter rival of Corbett's. Corbett would be throwing the medicine ball for about 20 minutes. Now, they're on the train and stopping off here and there on their way to New Orleans. When they hit Charlotte, North Carolina, Jim would first jog about a mile and a half. He'd punch the bag for about 30 to 40 minutes. He'd finish by sparring with a partner for about 40 minutes to an hour. Then he'd wrestle with him for another 20 minutes. Now, that partner, a guy named Daly, was unable to hit Corbett. During these workouts, James Corbett showed no symptoms of fatigue. In the evening, after dinner, he'd go for about a 5-mile walk. He'd practice maneuvers on the walk with another training partner. Sullivan, already in New Orleans, looked, according to local newspapers, as they put it, in grand form. Other stories being told privately had Sullivan as too fat and not very fit. Sullivan would hit a punching ball for about 20 minutes. Then he'd chat with Bob Fitzsimmons. Fitzsimmons would later become a heavyweight champion himself. Sullivan would then skip rope for about 5-6 minutes. Sullivan said during his workouts that he did not enjoy training. That was no secret. And he said this was going to be his last fight, regardless of how it turned out. 2 days before the fight, that would be September 5, Sullivan would be punching the bag for about 40 minutes, skip rope about 700 times. He did not, as reported, seem fatigued by this. But one newspaper reporter said he could see the rolls of fat on Sullivan. Corbett, in Spartanburg, South Carolina, on that same day, would be punching a bag, wrestle and spar again with Daly, toss the medicine ball, and he let it be known to reporters who were on the train with him that his opponent, the champion, John L Sullivan, had better be showing bare flesh above his navel, because it was rumored in one of his later fights, Sullivan had bandaged his stomach with heavy plasters for protection. Sullivan's people responded to this by saying he never intended to wear any kind of protection like that. He would appear only in his green trunks held up by a silk American flag. The day before the fight, Corbett would be throwing the 6-pound medicine ball for about half an hour. He'd skip rope, and he would say that because Sullivan was a 4-round knockout artist, that after the 6th round, he would have his own way. And that's pretty much how it turned out. Corbett was about 6 feet 1 inches tall, and he was going to enter the ring at about 190 pounds. Sullivan, the day before the fight, is hitting the punching ball about 25 minutes, firing left jabs and chop-like blows, according to one newspaper. His right hand would be used for short, quick swings, with enough force, said one reporter, to break the rope. Then Sullivan jumped rope 700 times. Later in the day, he did this same routine again. Then he went swimming with Bob Fitzsimmons. Now, this seems a bit excessive a day before a fight. These late 1890s training routines appear today somewhat modest compared to how people work out today. Now, they can work out as they do today, in part because of the introduction after the early 1960s of, well, chemical enhancements. But many fighters of the earlier period, like Sullivan in his early days and James J. Corbett, maintained condition year-round, sometimes by doing vigorous labor. They didn't get paid much, so they had to work outside the ring. And also they got into the impromptu bar fights quite often. But often men like Sullivan and Corbett, after he won famous champion, did get soft because of too much money, too much rich food, and too much dissolute living. Well, that's enough for today. Type in your comments below, tap the bell icon, share this and other videos on social media, and do subscribe to this channel. Thank you.